the mantra, the issue was pitisha tutarekebisha baadaye. So I'm still actively pursuing that with the churches, saying, you know what, the right to life, we want abortion banned and all those other things. And that is something as an active citizen you keep alive to. So the entire document is not a wash to me, it is alive to me, and I have the sworn duty to uphold it as an advocate of the High Court.
Thank you. I'll ask Linda to ask you some questions.
Thank you, Chairman. Ms. Mdivo, I appreciate your wealth of experience as a legal practitioner, both on the bench and in the bar, and of course in the civil rights groups, and with a good background of Christianity, which is one of the fundamental things that Kenyans look at, even as we are looking forward to getting a chairperson of this commission. Now, besides your wealth of experience as a legal practitioner and the exposure that you've had in your career journey, what is that 1, 2, or 3 experiences, and in addition to experiences, skills and disciplines that you have attained throughout the years that will help you as a chairperson of this commission to execute your mandate as a chair?
Thank you so much for that question. I currently serve as the board chair of the Kenya Power Company. And one of the things that I learned about myself is that you can teach an old dog new tricks, because that took me out of my legal space into the energy space. And within the last 2 years, I think I've learned a lot more engineering than I was taught in my years in school in physics. And so the ability to learn, to adapt, is something that the different scenarios that I have found myself in have made me alive and agile too. One of the things that I think makes me suitable for this job is the humility to accept what you do not know and to learn from those who know better than you. And one thing that I understand is that the Iebc has a very competent secretariat that has been carrying on their duties. So just like I did when I entered into Kenya Power, you lean into the wisdom in the room and you learn how to navigate in the new space that you're entering to. Something else that I think is a competence apart from my legal background is the fact that I am a person who has been very deeply participatory in teaching adults about things to do with their rights and other things. It has forced me to take a few courses on adult learning, for lack of a better word. And now that's something that you do not learn in court, how to communicate with people at their level, not using too much legalese or using too many complex words, but breaking down aspects to a level where people can understand. I think I'm also a very amiable person with excellent interpersonal skills. I work well as a team member and as a team leader. The spaces I have had to be able to lead people, I think, find testament that I am a good leader in terms of pulling people together and rallying them towards a cause. But I'm equally a good team player. So when you have to lean into the wisdom in the room, you have to participate with other people. That is a skill that I have had to learn, because, you know, lawyers, you're taught to always win everything, win every argument, and, you know, make your point heard across. But I've had to learn how to collaborate and to grow. I have had occasion to serve on several boards, and that has also exposed me to other sectors. So I have served in the Betting Control and Licensing Board. That was a whole new kettle of fish as well, learning all these different things that make people tick that you thought maybe were vices or other things. And I just learned to appreciate a different point of view. So I think in addition to being an advocate, I've had occasion to serve and to work with other Kenyans, and I've been exposed to other things that have opened up competencies in me that have made me realize that there's no monopoly of learning. You keep learning, and with the right application, you keep mastering what you learn.
Thank you. What is that one experience that you've had to endure during your career journey, and that which put a lot of pressure on you, that which had your leadership skills, management skills tested, and you came out successful? Please share with this panel.
That would take me back to the bench. There was the radical surgery that happened in the judiciary. And at the time the radical surgery was happening, I was on maternity leave. So I was posted in Mombasa at the time, which was the hotbed of politics of magistrates at the time. And so out of the magistrates we had, everybody was sent home as a result. And only the chief magistrate, the deputy head of station survived, one other advocate, one other magistrate was on leave, and then myself. So in a station that used to have about 12 magistrates, were left only 4. And I found myself having to work 4 courts in a day. So I'll do the civil bench, I'll do the criminal bench, I'll do the municipal court, and I will do the children's court. And I still had an infant at home. I was supposed to be on flexi hours, but there was no time for flexing hours. Now, this was not all housed in the same place. So the civil and the criminal court was in the same house, but municipal I had to cross over to the county government, and the children's court I had to cross over to Tononoka. Did not have a car. I was one of those people who lived within my means, so I was using tuk-tuks and public transport. That was a time when I felt the pressure of work. But by the time I was leaving Tononoka law courts, I think I hold the record as the only magistrate who cleared all her matters in court. I used to wait for people to file cases. I was that fast and efficient. You know, you get to a place where you learn how to be efficient. So interlocutory applications and things like that, there was no time for that. You come, we hear your matter, we finish. Judgments were delivered within minutes. I tell counsel, give me 20 minutes, I've written their judgments. And I got to a place where I had finished all my children's court matters. I used to wait for people to file matters, and then I'm told, you can come now, we have a few cases. So I think that's a time when I was stretched to the limit and I had to sort of elevate my game. And I'm glad I was successful, because even by the time I was resigning from judiciary, every single file that I handled had final orders. There's nobody I left in abeyance. I finished everything on my desk.
So what inspired the resignation? You seem like you were enjoying your job.
I was. Several things. First and foremost, I told you that time, gross salary was 60,000. It was not much at the time. It's not much even now. And the problem, not the problem, the thing with me is that I'm a strong believer. I got to a place where the money wasn't making sense. Now, the easy way out would have been to find more creative means of augmenting my earnings. I wasn't going to do that. I am more interested in seeing heaven than I am in living comfortably on earth. And so when push came to shove, that was a fairly easy decision to make. But the other decision that pushed me over the edge was that I had been transferred to Murang'a, and it was in 2008 when there was post-election violence. Now, with a surname like Masinde, Murang'a was not exactly a place where a mother with 2 young babies wanted to be. So there was this furore. One day, I think something happened, and there was Mungiki shut down the town, and I was locked in for 7 days. When I was done with that experience, I was like, look, even what I'm earning, surely let my LLB speak for me. That's when I gave it up, because I realized I wasn't making enough, and at that time it was endangering my life and my children's lives. And I decided, well, let's go try and see what's out there.
So, seeing the post-election violence that you underwent, as a chairperson, what are you willing to do differently that will impact on the lives of the future and the future of most Kenyans in the future elections?
One of the things that causes post-election violence is the fact that people feel robbed. They feel wronged. They feel like they participated in a process and they're not satisfied with the outcome. And when you have that dissatisfaction, it comes to a boil. Of course, there are other factors that had nothing to do with the election, but the primary reason why people are dissatisfied with the elections is just because they simply cannot understand what went on. One of the things that I'm hoping to be able to do is have transparency for the process, end to end. Let every observer understand exactly what is going on. Simplify the process. So, for example, the last election was, by standards, incrementally, it was one of the best that we have run so far. Having been an observer for several years, I can say this authoritatively. The last election was actually very well run. There's only one place where we floundered. Now, the KIMS kits that we have got several capabilities. One of the capabilities it has is to transmit results. For some reason, we chose not to use that aspect and decided to have people come to Nairobi to verify the hard copies before we could transmit the result. Now, that process took so long that in that 5-6 days, it gave room for theories and other things to come forward. And what that does, it festers. So by the time things are coming to a boil, even if there's no spark, the spark appears. So keeping the process transparent,
Thank you.
clear, honest, so that when people observe, they're satisfied with whatever results they get.
Thank you, Joy. Thank you, Chair.
Asante.
Joy, you are chair, and you are in Anniversary Towers. Now, this time is not Mungiki, but Kenyans besiege the place because of whatever decision that the commission has made, and you are in there for 3 days. Will you resign?
It depends. It depends. If I have worked in some hanky-panky that is obvious for people to see, then the honorable thing to do would actually be to resign. But there is a level to which where courage, push comes to shove, and now courage has to step up for you. So if I am doing what is needful to be done, if I'm doing what is needful as per my oath, because once I become chairman, I'm sure one of the things that will happen, I will take oath before I get into Anniversary Towers. So the terms of my oath, did I abide with that oath faithfully? If I did, and I know what is good for the country, I will stand my ground, because I'm one of those people who believes that God takes care of me. So the people paying for my blood, yes, but if I have been involved in something that is out of character or out of what I'm supposed to do, then the honorable thing to do would be to resign. And if that is a decision that I need to make for God and country, that is what I would do.
Thank you. Carol, do you like to go? Please.
Sure. Thank you, Chairman. Good evening once more, Joy. And let's talk about your impeding work at the IEBC. In the past days, months, you can say that maybe June 2023, 24. So this country went through a very difficult political terrain, which was caused by our youth, Gen Zs, right? So one of the things that they were actually looking into is to exercise their constitutional right at Article 104 to recall their political representatives from Parliament. How does the Constitution empower such a group of people who are aggrieved one way or another by the performance of their representative in Parliament to exercise their right to recall him or her?
Thank you for that question. One of the things that I found curious with the uprising last year was that people's grievances were genuine. When you listen to them, they actually were genuine concerns. Problem was how they were addressed would not arrive at the destination that they wanted. So for example, what you put down in Article 104, when you want to recall your MP, the parameters are very clear. What you need to do, go and collect signatures from at least 1,000 voters in that particular constituency, set out a petition stating what is your grievance with your MP.
So Joy, just to help me, I would like us to speak about some of these provisions in the law, in the Constitution, that perhaps the group, the young people of this country could have used. How does the Constitution empower them to exercise that right? Like step by step, if you don't mind.
Okay, so if you want to recall your MP, you first of all, you go to the constituency where you want to recall the MP and you gather the voters there. You have that discussion and you decide, you know what, our MP needs to go back. You need, first and foremost, they need to have finished, I think, at least the first, I think it's the first 2 years, if I'm not wrong, but I could be corrected. Once you have convinced your fellow voters, then you collect the signatures to say, you know what, we want to recall so-and-so MP, and this is the reason why. So you set out a small petition where you list down the reasons why you want to recall your MP. Once you have done this, then you present the same to the Speaker of the National Assembly so that it is tabled. You need to also get the buy-in of the other voters, because at the end of the day, once your MP is put to task as to the accusations against them, they will defend themselves, and if they're found to be culpable, then because of due process, then the process to remove them can begin. I don't think I'm too familiar with the nitty-gritty about the whys and the wherefores, but I know it is provided for, and it's something I think Kenyans have not yet elasticized. We still think if we shout loud enough, the MPs can go home, but everything is set out in the law.
Yeah, so one of the things that a person who intends to recall their member of parliament or their governor or the senator must do is that they must set out the grounds sufficiently for the recall. And these grounds are just not that. You must go further and obtain a judgment from the court that actually agrees that the particular member of parliament, the representative you want to recall, has violated Chapter 6. There must be such a finding from the court, has mismanaged public resources, or has been convicted of any other offense under the laws of Kenya, and therefore, after that judgment, now you follow the processes. Now, what I would like us to look at is, how does that process, what I've outlined now, those grounds, I mean, like, it must be preceded by a judgment. That's what the law says. That's what the Elections Act say. How does that now impact on the right to recall? Like, did you see any mischief? How is that supposed to, what did the MP, what was in the minds of the MPs when they were enacting this law?
Here, let me sound a little bit judgmental of the MPs, but I think some of these laws are passed with self-preservation in mind. So by putting the requirement that you need to get a judgment of the court first is prohibitive, because court processes are long-winded in our situation. You can't go in and come out with a judgment tomorrow. Then secondly, access to justice is still not where it is supposed to be. So you can file today under certificate of urgency, and 2 years down the road, you'll still be in court while somebody is still in office. So that is definitely a barrier that stops people from accessing or practicing what constitutionally should be made available for them. And I think we've seen this before, even with the Leadership and Integrity Act when it was being enacted. Some of the proposals that came out of the Committee on the Implementation of the Constitution were very strong on Chapter 6 and what constitutes Chapter 6 violations. But when the law went on the floor of the House, then you find a few hurdles that are put in place. For example, the requirement that for you to be barred from holding office, you have to have exhausted all your appeal mechanisms. So I would say that there is a barrier. It is provided for in the Constitution, but there is a barrier to accessing the same.
In addition to the self-preservation that you identified,
Your microphone.
Put on your mic, please.
Sorry, Chair. In addition to the issue of the self-preservation, which I think I agree with, there is also the requirement that, the recall process, you must have signatures from 2/3 of the members in your area of representation. In addition to that, you must have a list of names, the addresses of those people. And then particularly every ward, you must get 30% in every ward. So these are some of the barriers and the procedural handles that I think MPs put in place to safeguard the recall mechanism and, not to avoid the trigger of Article 104 of the Constitution. In that understanding then, what do you think would be the role of the IEBC when it comes to the recall processes?
I don't know if IEBC would be the first port of call when you're trying to amend that. I think the bigger stakeholder here, being the voter, is to have now voter education that tells the voters, look, you have the power to demand for some of these laws to be changed. It is in your power to petition your member of parliament. It is in your power. So IEBC can have the voter education angle where they tell people these provisions exist, but these are the barriers to it, and this is the cure. Because until the law changes, it remains the law. And I think the other thing that the IEBC would be able to do is to make recommendations to, for example, the Law Reform Commission and other bodies that actually routinely change the law. So writing to the Attorney General and making recommendations and saying, you know what, this is a constitutionally protected provision, but this is a barrier that has been put by statute. When it comes to the Constitution versus statute, Constitution wins. So kindly can we have this amended? Or they could sponsor a matter in court and get a decision from the court holding some of those provisions unconstitutional so that they must be expunged.
Then particularly when it comes now to the actual mandate of the IEBC now, how does it engage with the recall processes? Like, what is the role now of the IEBC actually now once the recall process has been initiated?
Now, Voter registration lies with the IEBC. And so if you're coming...
Sorry, this is in the context of assuming a particular voter who is interested in recalling their member of parliament has already done, has miraculously bypassed all the procedural handles. At what point does IBC get triggered now, and how does IBC get now involved in that process?
Yes, the IBC would be the one to verify that the voters who have been put down in the list are actual voters in that constituency. What are the numbers? Has the threshold been met? That would be IBC who would be doing the verification of that. And if the processes have gone and somebody has been indeed recalled, then it would be up to the IBC to conduct the by-election for their replacement.
Who triggers the election process?
Once a seat has been declared vacant by the Speaker.
Who declares it vacant?
Because before you are removed from office, once you recall, there has to be due process that you will go through, that now the finding would be that you're no longer fit to hold office. Until that finding has been made and the same communicated to the IEBC, then at that point, the IBC now starts the election cycle.
Okay, so once the call notice has been issued by the IBC to the Speaker declares the seat vacant, and then the IBC within 90 days has to conduct
the by-election.
Yeah, a recall, let's call it.
Oh yes, once it's a recall, it's an election.
Lastly, have the courts in any way engaged on these parameters of the recall provisions in Article 104 of the Constitution? Do you recall any way the court have engaged?
I don't think they have been robustly tried anywhere. I don't think anyone has really attempted and gone far enough in the recall. The closest I can think of is, I think some people collected signatures for the recall of Honorable Mushomba at some time. But even that did not go beyond the let's collect signatures. So I don't think it has been robustly tried in our court system for us to see whether the recall process can actually be followed through to the end.
Thank you, Joy. I wish you the best. And thank you, Chair.
Asante.
Thank you, Karo Kituku. We would like to go to Ambassador Dr. Koki Muli. Please.
Thank you very much, Chair. And good evening again, Wakili. The last 2 days, we have heard from other candidates. They spoke a lot about trust deficit against the IEBC being a serious impediment to credible or acceptance of results after elections, and also challenges, leading to challenges because of trust deficit. The first small question I would like you to respond to the panelists in brief is what factors contribute to this trust deficit? Just say maybe three factors that contribute to the trust deficit against IEBC.
First, there's the perceived lack of transparency. I say perceived because sometimes maybe you've given as much transparency as you can and it's still deemed to be insufficient. I think another contributing factor is the deemed interference by the political players in the election process, and so that also creates a trust deficit. Then I think we have also, it's a cultural issue where if you lose an election or if you're on the side that is dissatisfied, then the first allegation is the first response is not to concede, but is to allege that there was malpractice. So that sort of sets people up to expect that there's something that has gone wrong, even if they can't put their finger on it. Those would be the three that I think I would point out.
Cultural issue?
Yes, as in our culture, we are naturally suspicious. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. So people, before they even interrogate the issues, they just think there must be something wrong. So culturally, Kenyans are suspicious. When something goes on, there must be something that they're cooking. So even when there's nothing that is being cooked, our culture is basically, the first default position is not to say, I have lost an election, I concede to my opponent, is to say it was stolen. And now that sets people up to not trust the process, to always think it has been tampered with.
am trying to understand when this culture began, or has it always been like this?
Not really. If I recall, the only time we had, let me talk about presidential elections. The only time we had a presidential election where the runner-up conceded readily was when Uhuru Kenyatta conceded to Honorable Kibaki. And that time, I remember it was something that was quite out of the ordinary, because prior to that, it was always Moi would win, but would all say, you know what, he has manipulated the system, they have stuffed the boxes. So it's like already Kenyans imagine that with political players being part of the electoral process, there must be something going on. Now with subsequent elections, once the election has been declared, the next thing you see is a press statement, it was stolen. We saw this and that, this is an issue. So the suspicion has gotten Kenyans to a place where when an electoral process is concluded, it's almost like the default position is look for anything that has gone wrong. It's not that, oh, the process is over and yeah, here are the results. The culture is like, we must challenge. There must be something wrong. We must fight.
Thank you very much. I was beginning to worry because we have had elections since 1963. I wanted also to follow up a little bit on that and say you are successful and you get this position of chair of the Electoral Commission. And this matter is not something that is going to go away very soon, this trust deficit. I would like you to share with us, as a matter of priority, what are the kinds of strategies that you would put in place to address this trust deficit, either reduce it or end it completely, and create confidence and trust in the IEBC?
Thank you so much. I think one of the things that we would have to definitely leverage on is the use of technology. Like I said, the last elections, when we're using our KIMS kit, one of the benefits or one of the capabilities that it had was to transmit election results. However, we chose to transmit the image of the paper, but we did not choose to transmit the results themselves. Now, in my mind, if the results were transmitted in tandem, so on the portal, you not only see the image, but the tabulation of the results is being done in real time, the adding up, that would have created transparency. So I take a leaf, for example, from an election I saw in Ghana, where the election results were declared within 12 hours. Because if the tabulation is being done on a running course, once polls close at 5 and the counting has gone on, if you transmit the image and the results and then the verification, by the manual verification follows later, then you remove the period of uncertainty and for the build-up. So the first thing is to leverage on technology. Second thing is to have a culture of transparency and efficiency. When people come to a polling station, they can't find their names in the BVR kits, they cannot, the polling station is opening late, those things build an inefficiency, and that builds the suspicion that maybe there is something wrong, maybe I'm being disenfranchised. So a culture of efficiency. Excellence is a language. So if you have an organization that runs like clockwork, things start when they're supposed to start. When you put in your biometrics, they're found. When you vote, it is seamless. At the end of the day, it is easier for people to accept election results. So I think those are some of the things that I can see as low-hanging fruits. Improve efficiency, leverage on technology, be as transparent and as clear as possible with the results, such that they are not a secret that is being withheld, but is something that all Kenyans can see building up, and hopefully get to a place where even the casual observer can know the result at the same time as the IEBC is knowing the result because of the level of transparency.
Thank you very much. Indeed, excellence is a language. How do you practically, what measures, step by step, would you put in place to improve efficiency and transparency?
I think where it starts with your human capital. Make sure that the people you're working with are well trained, they're well equipped. So from the time the election cycle starts, let's look at our laws. Are there places where there's elasticity that can be battened down? Secondly, let's look at our technology. Now I'm talking as if I'm in the IEBC. Let's look at our technology. Is it the latest technology we have? Is it the best that we can afford? Once that is in place, the people who I have, are they trained to use this technology and efficiency to the best of their ability? Then my MATIANG'I case told us the polling station is where the election result is finalized. So I need to have seamless communication between the polling station and the tallying center. So when I send my officers, is there enough technological support? The thing we saw last time of places without network. Now, can we change and start using Starlink, for example, that is satellite-based, is not dependent on phone coverage, so that everything is done seamless and in real time? Back here as well, what is the role of other stakeholders? What's the role of media in participating in the process? The political party observers, the other election observers, how much transparency do they have? So that everybody is coming with you from the point where people open the polls to the time when the election, the ballots are being counted, to when they're being tallied, to when they're being announced. So if we uphold that the process of end-to-end transparency, then you leave very little room for guesswork or for mischief, as it were.
Thank you. Allow me to pursue this a little bit better in another way.
Please.
You have been observing elections, quite a number of elections here, and you have also observed elections in a country like Ghana, where you say that the election results is declared within 12 hours, and it's a big country, just like ours. And yet here in Kenya, we hear all the time the Iebc asking for more money to do, to get, to introduce or to enhance the use of technology in conducting elections. What stops us from employing that technology to bring that efficiency in practical matters and to create that transparency, to address the issue of trust deficit? So I want to bring you back into just the practical things that you would do. Imagine that on 1st of June, or I mean 1st of sometimes next month or the month after, you become the chair of the Electoral Commission.
I think so far the problem with technology has been, again, that culture of suspicion. Vifaranga via computer, imagining that there are logarithms that are going to mess up with the result. Now, in this day and age, things have come a long way. So, for example, artificial intelligence is something that can be adopted to ensure the veracity of some of these processes. So it's not based on some server in France. It's something that it can be verified in real time. Another thing I think that where we can leverage on technology, like I said, the technology we have has the ability to transmit results in real time. Last time we did not do the transmission in real time because, again, the trust deficit meant we wanted to wait, let the returning officer come to Nairobi, let the Iebc verify what he has, let the political party agents sit around the table and each verify before it is announced. Now, that time, it took us almost the entire 7 days to do that process. And I think we've learned from that because by the time the results were being declared, the tension had built up too much. So this time, put in the transmission as well. When you've put in the image, also key in the results, let the tabulation start. At the moment you have keyed it in, even as you travel to Nairobi with your hard copies for them to be verified. I think another thing that we can leverage on, and especially to the question you brought about cost, is to come to a place where we are more pragmatic about what we do. So currently our ballot paper has got over 7, I think, security features. It has more features than our money, and it's absolutely ridiculous for paper that is single use to have that many security features simply because of a trust deficit. I think time has come as Kenyans for us to decide, you know what, some of these things we can do in-house, leverage on the technology we have available here and now, to have ballot papers that are verifiable. And like I said, if the transmission is done in real time, there's no time to stuff ballot boxes, because once you close the polls, you count, you transmit. There's no time for hanky-panky in between. So that would be how I think we would be able to use technology and surmount this trust deficit and bring down the cost, because if we produce the ballot papers here locally, it will save us a whole lot of money.
Thank you. Just one tiny question
Sure.
to follow up. I'm trying to try to see how we can deal with this trust deficit. How would you convince people, especially politicians, to accept to have the ballot paper printed in Kenya with maybe one security feature?
It depends on what that security feature is. If it's something that's not easily replicable, and you know, we've come to a place where even how we have structured our polling stations, only certain number of people vote in a particular polling station. I mean, the last time the children were doing KCSE exams, we saw they employed technology to have the candidate's picture on the answer sheet and even their name and index number printed on. You know, it can get to a place where we are printing personalized ballot papers. So even if we are counting, it is the ballot paper for Joy in that polling station that she has cast. And if she has not cast it, it should remain in the. So it's a matter of being creative about it. And when push comes to shove, is putting our foot down and saying, you know what, this is what we're going to do. Because like I said before, the seeming over-involvement of political actors in the electoral process is a major reason why people have a trust deficit, because these are the people playing in this field. They're the direct beneficiaries of this process, and yet they have almost the biggest say in what goes on in the process. So there'll come a time when the push will come to shove, a foot will have to be put down, public participation, members of the public can also lend their voice to the process, and the politicians will have to listen to the voice of people, which is said to be the voice of God.
Okay, just one last one, Chair. If we printed a ballot paper that is personalized to Joy, wouldn't that interfere with the principle of a secret ballot? Just think about it. Thank you, Chair.
And perhaps just to pick up there, I think the people of Kenya may not be the problem you want to convince. How will you convince politicians first? Because they're the ones whose votes get lost or whatever it is.
Or get stolen.
Yes, you need to get there. How would you convince politicians first?
One of the things we saw during the last general election is that there were a lot fewer cases that were filed challenging some of the other races, apart from the presidential one. There were a lot fewer cases that were filed because the process this time around was a lot more open to the people who are running. And so when the courts have pronounced themselves and said, for you to challenge an election result, don't just say generalities. Tell us exactly what went wrong in what polling station so that that can be addressed. When the standard was raised, the standard to say, complain about something specific, then maybe many of them now could not use the excuse of, it was marred by transparency and opacity, I did not know what happened, but something must have gone wrong. No, now you had to have a reason to say that this election was interfered with. So I think part of it is what has come out of our courts, where the standard of challenging an election has been made, such that you don't just come with any complaints and say, I'm not satisfied. Now you must address yourself to a specific issue. So I think with the politicians, it's nurture. They will have to be trained to accept results. And if we have seen it in the races for MCA, for MP, and for women rep and for governor, then I think eventually, even for the presidential result, it will come to a place where you'll be asked in this entire process, what exactly is your problem? And if you cannot pinpoint it, then you are forced to accept the results. So eventually, we will get there. But it is a tall order because I think the culture so far has been every result is challenged.
Thank you very much. I'll ask FCPA Tanui to pick up from there. Thank you.
Brenda, I admire your thinking in terms of how we can change our electoral process and the ideas that our ambassador here is asking you whether they are workable or not. But I like the idea that you are very open. And I want to take that with the elections, like even in the US. Actually, in the US, people watch TV and they will know who is the president by simply sitting and watching the television. So I would wish that one day we wouldn't have to struggle and spend 2,000 shillings per ballot paper in our country and be able to sit behind our TV screens and within 12 hours or after the election, or even by 10 p.m. We close the election at 6. So by 10 p.m. before we go to sleep, we already know who is or who are our election winners. So thank you for those ideas that you're coming up with. Now I want you to share your experience in Ghana in terms of the leadership. How is the structure of Ghana Electoral Commission in terms of the role of the chair of that Electoral Commission? Any experience that you got while you were there?
No, I did not go to Ghana. I compared and contrasted what went on in Ghana, and I don't think I can be very authoritative to state how they go through their election cycles. So that one is a pass for me.
Okay. Now, coming home, you've told us you've been, you are the current chair of KPLC, yeah?
Yes, I am.
And BCLB, you are a board member.
I am a former board member.
A former board member.
Yes.
So those are part-time responsibilities, isn't it? Even
Yes.
KPLC.
Yeah, even KPLC.
Now, here at IEBC, you will be the chairperson on a full-time basis.
Yes.
Now, KPLC is a public listed company.
Yes, it is.
It is also a state corporation by the fact that government wants 50.1%.
Yes, it is.
And also PCLB is a state corporation.
Yes, it is.
So how will your skills or your experience at PCLB and KPLC help you in transitioning to IEBC as a chairperson?
Let me start with BCLB because that's the easier one. And BCLB, I was a director. So on that, I was a team player. There was a chairman and I was one of the team players. And one of the things that I think helped me with this is I'm a religious person. I have been a believer since I was a child. BCLB is managing a vice, for lack of a better word. I had to open my mind up to alternative living that people have, be non-judgmental about it, be effective as a director. And I think that stint at BCLB was very important also to understand how people's day-to-day lives are affected by decisions of big corporations. So for example, when I was in the BCLB is when this sports betting had just started. And we realized that even grandmothers, as in students, were being drawn into this thing, and we realized it was a problem. We tried to bring in regulations to curb this, but eventually got to a place where, you know, you move on and the next council comes in, and some of those things, the follow through is not as thorough. So that opened me up to how decisions made at this table affect day to day. It's stories of children who have eaten school fees, a mother who children send her money in the village and she bets it all until she starts selling condo in the estate to try and do that. Now coming to Kenya Power, one of the things that I learned at Kenya Power is that when you're chairman, you sit on that chair, yes, and you think you're almighty, but you're actually a first among equals. And that is a lesson that I have had to learn daily. So when I went in as chair, that was my first stint at chairing such a big organization. I had to learn, like I said, the humility of leaning on the wisdom in the room. I was not an engineer, and this is an engineering firm. It is very male dominated because engineers mostly happen to be men. And I had to come to a place where I admit this is where my capabilities stop and this is where learning starts. Now, that last 2.5 years that I have been at the helm of Kenya Power has taught me the benefit of continuous learning. But not only that, I found Kenya Power at a time when the staff morale was very low. The quotient of productivity was wanting. The organization itself, the Auditor General had indicated that it was functionally insolvent. If it wasn't a public utility company, it would have been advisable to wind it up. And that is where, when I joined Kenya Power, that's where I found it. Now, the last 2 years have been about rebuilding the confidence of the members of staff, bringing camaraderie back into it, trying to bring up a culture of efficiency. We are not where we want to be, But of late, we have started seeing it paying dividends. People are working harder than they've ever worked before. We were able to convince Parliament to lift moratoriums on hiring. People had been resigning, they had been retiring, they had been dying with no replacement. The staff was stretched to the limit. Now, we're showing them that we have good governance now. We can be trusted to hire more. We started by hiring an MD, a process that they had tried to outsource to other, technical experts, and they had failed. My board went ahead and did it, and we have ourselves an MD who has been able to turn around the company. So that has given me the confidence to know that, you know what, even if a task is difficult, with right leadership and just resetting the tone from the top, you're able to achieve a lot in terms of a change and a turnaround. If you walk into Kenya Power right now, you'll find staff that are motivated to work. You'll find people who are putting their best foot forward. And as we have declared in our last results and in our half-year results, we are back in profitability. And I'm very, very grateful, because I know it's not just because of the chairman that they got, but I've been able to rally the management and my board and the members to have a new trajectory to bring Kenya Power back to the place where it's supposed to be, where it's offering value for the shareholders and for the government and for the people of Kenya.
Now, one unique feature about the commission is that you will not be attending board meetings on a quarterly basis like the way you're doing at KPLC. You will be a full-time employee with 6 other commissioners, all full-time. At the same time, you have secretary to the commission, who is the chief executive officer, with a professional team of technical officers at the commission. So looking at KPLC, where you're part-time, you come for board meetings, you make decisions, you leave. Here you'll be there full-time. Other 6 commissioners, you're also full-time. They are CEO full-time, technical officers full-time. So how will you handle that scenario?
Let me start from the known to the unknown. So the known is what you have described. That's the position we have at the commission right now. And being full-time means then you are behaving like an executive chairman rather than an non-executive chairman that I am now. That means, therefore, the buck stops with you. So I can't come and issue board resolutions and leave the responsibility of implementation solely to the CEO. The chair has as much responsibility for what is executed as does the secretariat. Now, to the unknown, which would be something that I think is an idea that needs to be mooted, maybe we need to rethink that structure. Because part of the problem that we have had at the Iebc has been the conflict between the commission and the secretariat. With what I've seen at KPLC, that Chinese wall between the board and the management is very useful in showing where one's responsibility ends and where the other begins. When you've got an executive chairman and you've got a CEO, you effectively have got 2 centers of power. And sometimes then you find it's like in a home, when the children know, I can play mommy off daddy. If mommy says yes, I go and tell daddy, mommy said yes. And so you have a situation where staff have loyalties, staff have got things that they think, this one is a godfather on this side, this one protects me on this side, and it builds inefficiencies. And sometimes you've seen that coming to play. So for example, most of the chairs in the past, Isakasan and Oswago, there's a difficult relationship there. Chiloba and Chebukati, there's a difficult relationship there. In fact, Chebukati, Marjan, I think they got into a place where things were so difficult they had to stick together because it was the 3 surviving commissioners and the CEO. So to break down that dichotomy, maybe we employ principles of good governance and have the commission on a basis where there may be part-time, or you have fewer commissioners who have got very specific roles. If it's policy, because when you look at the rules of the IBC that are set out, there's some of those roles that surely a secretariat, voter registration, looking at the register, updating the register and other things, those should be squarely in secretariat. But by law, the sort of split between the commission and the secretariat. So I think that gives to attention that sometimes needs to be resolved to improve efficiency. But because it's a constitutionally protected commission, it's not a very easy fix. But it can be fixed. Now, how to mitigate that? It's personalities. Is learning to make room for others and keep your space where you're supposed to have space. When you need to put your foot down, know that this one, the buck stops with me. You put your foot down and just have a give or take. Have a more laid back approach. Because if you come ham and tongs, then the discordance is amplified. But when you learn to do the give and the take, eventually you find a working modus operandi that is beneficial to everyone.
Well, let me commend you, because I think, having listened from yesterday, you're the first candidate that has thought outside the box, trying to rethink that governance system of the commission. And I want to appreciate that. And the reason why I'd ask you what was your experience in Ghana is in line with your thinking on how we may rethink the framework. Having full-time commissioners, having full-time secretariat, and you'd expect good working relationship. So thank you for that. Now, I know KPLC, your turnover is quite huge. You are in hundreds of billions
Yes, we
in
are.
terms of your turnover. Equally, IEBC is one of the highly funded commissions, because, again, as we've said, the expensive nature of our elections. So one of the challenges that IEBC has had is issues of transparency, accountability in use of public resources. And if you look at the Auditor General report, there are a series of observations, key audit matters that the Auditor General has always picked them up. So as the chair, and hearing you, it's like you appreciate what the role of the chair will be. So how do you go about in terms of ensuring that the resources that have been given to IEBC are used in line with the requirement of PFM, Public Finance Management Act, appreciating your role as a chair and that of the Secretariat and the CEO? Thank you.
I think one major challenge we have seen with the IEBC funding in the past is the fact, first and foremost, that they still have to rely on the exchequer for their funding. This reliance on the exchequer means if there's delays and you've got constitutional timelines, then other things start to suffer. So, for example, in public finance management, procurement rules, you have to go into the procurement process before you onboard something. But if it is in the interest of the political parties, some of whom are the ones in government who are going to be running in the election, and they decide, we'll keep this as our trump card to just, delay the process, so that in the end it is single sourcing, and when it is single sourcing, it is Fulani who's doing it. So there's some of these things that I think for the IBC we have to get creative in how even we apply public finance management. Let me give you a small example. When I joined Kenya Power, one of the things I realized is that the vendors have learned how to use the law to make everything as expensive as possible. So I may look through and see there's a factory producing something at 15 shillings, but by the time I go to tender, according to the public finance management, what I'm getting is quotes of 200 shillings, what wameachana na shilingi mbili, shilingi tatu, because there is a general collusion amongst them. Now, because I am bound by the principles of public, I cannot say no, if I go direct to the factory, I'll get it for less. Then I find myself in a conundrum. Maybe there is need to relook at some things, like, for example, for elections. If there's timelines that are being mismanaged, and you can tell there's an intentionality, there must be provision, or there should be a safety valve that we're able to do things more efficiently. Like I said, outsourcing most of our election materials, for example, is one of the things that I find rises our costs to levels that is unsustainable. We spend 2,000 bob printing one ballot paper. Countries like Rwanda, I think, are down to $1 per ballot paper. In the same vicinity as ourselves, you might say their circumstances are different, which I admit is true, but why not here? We've got institutions like JKUAT, where the work is technology. We have gotten to a place where we can refine this thing until the finances that we have are able to cater for what we have. The trust, the fund, the IEBC fund as well, how it is managed. When everything is run too late, everything is a rush job, then there is opportunity for pilferage. But if everything is done timeously and in order, and there's no delays, and there is proper accountability, then you find you are able to seal the leakages. So I think one major problem we've had is that people have learned how to use the law to benefit private enterprise. And when you look at an institution like IEBC as a channel for procurement, then it becomes an issue. But in my mind as well, being so, like the other day we saw IEBC defending the budget, and you hear a figure like 61 billion, you start salivating and starting to see what can we do with this. Maybe if the same was made so manageable that the figures are not so astronomical, you'd find a situation where the incidences of we need more money are less. But that said, the other players in the election process also have to play game. First and foremost, like we said, the politicians, they have to come to a place where their demands are less. Because why do we have all these ballot papers with all the safety features? It's because they demanded, no, this can be done like this, can be done like this. Who does like this? It is them who do like this. They also have to come to a place where they elevate their integrity and say, you know what, we will not be party to printing extra ballot papers. We will not be party to participating in this. Maybe we need to relook at our laws, election offences laws. Is there time to make them more stringent such that if you're caught in such malpractices, therefore, the hammer comes down so hard that it's simply not worth it. If you want to remain in the game, then you think twice about it. I think in Kenya we've made it too easy, or we've made it beneficial for people to benefit from public funds to a level where it becomes inefficient to run things, not just in the IEBC, but this is across the board.
I wish you well and all the best. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, CPA.
I want to ask Bwana Misati Evans to engage you a bit more.
Thanks so much, Brenda. I chose to call you Brenda. Now, I'm also one of the people who have noticed that you're thinking outside the box, and I'm happy. Now, I want to ask you a question in your own thinking. Last year in October, as Tanui has mentioned, I had an opportunity to do the US election observation. I was with Bola here. Now, the system I saw there where our host, the CEO of Iebc, was actually voting in Washington, D.C., and we went around with him, and he went and voted, as we could see, and the system he would just click and get is first, the system is identified as a voter, then from there on, the system he votes, and then the system does the counting. No human involvement. Given that now you have demonstrated that you can think out of the box, do you think such a thing can happen here in Kenya, and what are the possibilities?
Thank you so much. In fact, that's one of the more exciting things about what happened with Gen Z, because now we have a generation that is coming up that is so tech savvy, so tech driven, that they don't need hard paper confirmation of what is going on. And some of these things will be a function of, God will just have to exit one generation and bring in another. Because when I started voting, we had an elderly generation that was largely illiterate or semi-illiterate. And so even things like Mulolongo was seen to be a viable voting option because that made sense to the generation then. Then come our generation, we have a little bit of education, we want ballot papers, we want... This generation that is coming is so tech savvy, they want to employ convenience. They want to employ technology to make things easier for them. So for example, in the Law Society, we still have it in our act that the IEBC is going to conduct our elections. So you'll find the lawyers lining up the whole day in the Supreme Court in the sun on the roof of Milimani, waiting to manually cast a vote. Nairobi branch of the Law Society, where I served, decided this doesn't make any sense. We looked at our colleagues in Iebc, where you send your members a token. Using their unique token, they're able to vote. Voting was over 2 days. You do it in the convenience of your office. And once voting closed, within 2 minutes, all the results are tabulated, real time. Can we get there? Yes, we can. The technology exists. the generation where we are coming into actually accepts that as a legitimate way of doing things. So I think where we are headed, even just the function of, as people are growing older, we'll find ourselves that becomes a reality. And like I said, if something is real time like that, there's no time to stuff ballot boxes. There's no time to change the results along the way. By the time it is done, everybody from the media houses to the casual observers know the results.
Thanks so much for that, because somebody will ask to add on that. What you're saying is that we have had institutions like Safaricom, which has a system of M-Pesa, which has never had a problem. The banks, your ATM has never given you wrong money at any given time. So it's a matter of thinking that how much does it cost really, and it's now a matter of if given an opportunity. Who are the key stakeholders you think you might have to involve to ensure that we walk that journey, to ensure that we have those electoral reforms to change that system? And do you think it's possible to do that?
First and foremost, I think it starts with the general public. We have to come to a place where there is the clamor for this change. So the last election showed that people are ripe for something that works. The next port of call, of course, is to change our laws. So we have to engage the members of parliament. The laws have to be changed. What has to be changed constitutionally must be changed constitutionally, which is what NADCO was attempting to say, you know what, this doesn't work anymore. Of course, them they're looking at the political aspect of the computation. But with us, if you're looking at electoral reforms, you can say, look, voting cannot just be by this or by that. It can also be electronic. It can also be virtual. The other thing that we need to also employ is to invest in technology. Once you have the technology in place, like you said, you can deploy it as many times as you need to. You don't have to do it afresh. Once you have technology, it's just buying the licenses, keeping them up to date, and you move them forward. I'm in a company that's very tech savvy, and I look at some of the things, for example, like you said, when you buy your token and you get and you key it in, you get what you have bought. The technology exists. So it's talking to members of the public, getting their buy-in, talking to members of the parliament, changing the laws, then now implementing bodies ourselves, the judiciary, ourselves here being IEBC, the implementing bodies like the political parties. The laws have to change there as well. You have to look even at the dispute resolution systems, all the other people who are part of this ecosystem, to ensure that at the end of the day people understand what we have done and how we have changed it.
The last question is now, if IEBC as a commission were to introduce a number of human resources policies, what will you do, particularly looking at the breach of confidentiality by staff?
You know, the Public Officer Ethics Act, the Data Protection Act, the Penal Code, and the oath any public officer takes when they join the office. I think we have been a bit reluctant in implementing some of these things to the full extent. In this day and age, if I send an email from my house that is damaging or that is breaching confidentiality, the technology exists to pinpoint the exact location and the exact computer that released that information. I think sometimes we do not bother to employ something to the full extent. We live in a world where people want to have breaking news. Don't be the first one telling you about things. And you find even confidential documents, it's a photo, it's a send. But you never find out what was the source of the breach. It becomes breaking news. We have it on reliable information. So maybe some consequences need to start following so that people understand that when you are taking an oath, when these laws are all in place, when the data protection law is in place, these things are not there for maridadi. They are there because there's something they're meant to do. So I think implementing the law in a manner that demonstrates consequences. I would encourage, even if you're a private individual who's offended or affected by this, take it to court. Let's test the veracity of this law. You have breached my data, you have exposed me in this manner and have suffered this loss. Get hit with damages, and we see you taking a loan to pay it and losing your job because you've gone to jail for more than 6 months. I think the part that has been the missing link is the consequences. So people have been doing this and getting away with it. Maybe that needs to change so that people understand that When you're in a place of responsibility, there is also the place of accountability.
Thanks so much. I'm satisfied with that answer, and I wish you well as we move.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Misati. Allow me to ask Nicodemus Bore to also come to your, or Fatuma Saman, Miss, kindly.
I thought you were baptizing me, friend. Hi, Joy.
Hello.
I want to join the chairman in congratulating you for taking the courage to apply.
Asante.
Because at times as women we complain, but we don't have the courage and the confidence to do so. So thank you. As you may already know, remote areas and far to reach areas, and also violent prone areas in our country are usually disenfranchised when it comes to the electoral processes, from the voter education, the actual voting, even the civic education doesn't get to reach. So if you get an opportunity to become the IEBC chair, how would you mitigate this? How would you transform this and ensure that all Kenyans fully participate in the electoral process?
Maybe I can take a leap from where we've come from, talking about technology, because you'll find in Kenya right now the proliferation of telephones is very widespread. People have a telephone, whether it is a smartphone or it is a feature phone, but people have a phone. This thing called USSD, where you can use a short code to access something, can be designed that it is uniquely identifiable by, for example, your ID card as an identifier, your ID number. Now in Kenya, again, because of the trust deficit, you want to see the physical person appearing at the polling station. But there's some of these areas that are so far flung that becomes sometimes practically impossible. Then we have to use technology. Like I said, now we have Starlink. So where before we had to depend on a place with network coverage, we can upgrade our game and use satellite to communicate to people in far-flung areas. Use of the resources. So for example, we see politicians when they're on the campaign trail or they are doing their work, they use helicopters like taxis. Why do we not also employ the same to ensure that places that need to be reached and are cut off? For example, after the recent floods we had, there's some areas of this country that were cut off. Employing enough resources to ensure that what needs to get to the people has gotten to the people. Now, in terms of voter education, we have to be more deliberate about how it's done. Collaborating, for example, with Ngao. Every chief has barazas. And I remember there's a time in the IBC, there was an organization called KNICE that used to do voter education. Now, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. Use churches, use mosques, places where people naturally gather to pass information that needs to be done. Use technology as well. We know when it comes to public broadcasting, radio is king. We spend a lot of money on TV and on others, but we know more people listen to radio and on there and do this as they're riding, when they're at work. It's the one thing almost everybody listens to. Leverage that to use to pass on important information. There are things that we used to see when we were youngsters that I realized were very effective. Vioja Mahakamani and other such skits where it was using humor but passing on an important message. So it's a matter of just being deliberate about including all Kenyans. There are other people who are marginalized, for example, by disability. It's just being intentional about how we are involving them in the participatory process. So for example, in voter registration, when you're gathering your data, if somebody, for example, is visually impaired, that can tell us in Mugomweni ward, in the polling station in Uhuru Gardens, there's 2 people who are visually impaired. Surely, as we are printing ballot papers, to print 2 ballot papers at a braille can become part of best practice. So I think it's a matter of being more conscious about involving everybody and being creative with our solutions rather than saying this is how it's supposed to be done and throwing our hands up. It might cost us more sometime, but that is the purpose of coming together. Like in Kenya Power, if everybody paid top dollar for their power, there are people in places where it costs us more to get the power to them than we are getting money from them. But there's cross-subsidization. The ones who can afford to pay a little bit more usually pay a little bit more, so the ones who cannot afford it, get it. So the same spirit of udugu that we sing in our national anthem should be applied to make sure that every Kenyan is able to practice the Article 38 rights to the fullest extent possible.